I had to sign in. I don't know what happened. But anyway,
Oh,
all right, we're good. See, I
here.
said it was good,
It told us.
and I was right. Okay. Oh, and just as an announcement, we're not going to meet next week. It's going to be the week before Pesach, and we're all going to be too busy. So this is going to be it till after the Chag,
Yes.
and I
Okay.
will take the
Okay.
time. I will take the time next Tuesday evening to hopefully finish putting together my Shabbos Hagadol drasha, and everyone is invited to come to shul next Shabbos. Well, next Friday night we're having Chinese dinner. You got to sign up for. And next Shabbos morning will be the Shabbos Hagadol drasha, followed possibly by a kiddush sponsored by Lou and Gwen. Who knows? We'll have to see. But anyway, here, can everyone see the source sheet? I need to zoom in more, right?
A little bit bigger.
More?
Hi, Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice.
Hello.
Hello, Bracha.
Okay. All right, so we are in Parshat Tazria. In most years, it's read as a double parsha along with Mitzorah, but because we're in a leap year and the way the calendar works out, we read Tazria by itself. Generally, when Tazria and Mitzorah are read together, the focus is on Tzara'at, on the affliction of what's translated as leprosy, and often discussions of Lashon Hara, because that is one of the main culprits for why someone would come down with leprosy or tzara'at, however we want to translate it. But we're going to focus on a passage at the beginning of the parsha, which precedes any discussion of tzara'at, and really a better theme would be laws of tuma and tahara, laws of purity and impurity. So that started last week with the second half of the parsha focused. Is that Judy Floam?
Oh,
Well, she can't hear it. Judy, you're muted.
Click your microphone. We can't hear you.
Judy, we want to hear you. We want to hear if you got a Boston accent yet.
There she is.
All right.
No. I still have
What a
my
treat.
accent.
Hi, Judy.
hi, Judy.
Yes.
Welcome back. Thank you.
You're unmuted.
And we don't see moving boxes in the background, so that's a good sign.
Well, that's because the camera isn't facing them.
That's because they're in the front of the computer, right?
And thanks to you, the Orioles beat the Boston Red Sox 7-1 today. Yay!
Oh, wow.
That's thanks to the Red Sox.
I told them not
stinking.
to play too well, so yeah, worked out fine.
All right, it's great to see you, Judy. It's great to see you. So I was saying that the more apt theme for the parsha would really be Tuma and Tahara, laws of purity and impurity, and that's true for several parshiot coming up in Sefer Vayikra that started last week with the laws of kashrut, of which animals are permitted and not permitted, and the non-permitted ones are called tamei, impure. And now it's going to focus this week on purity and impurity of the body associated with various ways in which a human body can become impure. Most familiar to us is Nida, the laws of menstruation, but also other bodily fluid, emissions that we like to not focus on so much. And all sorts of ills, Sarat, of course, leprosy, and as we're going to discuss right now, in the case of a Yoledet, a woman who gives birth. So this is the very beginning of the parsha. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Where did my source sheet go? God Hashem speaks to Moshe, saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael lemor, Isha ki tazria v'yalda zachar. Shiv'at yamim ki'yamei nidat devota titma. If a woman gives birth and or becomes pregnant and has a son, then she should be tme'ah, which will translate as impure, for 7 days, just as after her menstruation period. Uviyom hashmini yamo basar orlato, and on the 8th day the child will be circumcised. Ushloshim yom ushloshet yamim teshev b'dmei tahara b'chol kodesh lo tiga b'mikdash lo tavo ad melot yamei tahara, and then she has this period of yamei tahara, of days of purity, which really are days of impurity, for 33 days. If she gives birth to a daughter, then she's impure for a time of 14 days. V'shishim yom v'sheshet yamim teshev al demei tahara, and then she has this period of yamei tahara of 66 days. So maybe in a previous year we discussed why there's the imbalance for the birth of a boy and a girl. We're not going to really focus on that tonight, but it is worth noting that it is exactly 1-to-2 ratio, and why that is, well, it's not going to be a topic for tonight, but it's a question at least worth pointing out. When these days of Yemei Tahara, the days of impurity, conclude, Tavi keves ben shnato le'ola, uben yona otor lechatat, el petach o moed el kohen. She brings 2 sacrifices. She brings a lamb of 1 year old as an olah, as an elevation offering, and she brings a yonah otor, a pigeon or a dove, as a chatat, which we translate as a sin offering to the opening of the tent of meeting to the Kohen. Zot Torat Yoledet lazachar o lenekeva, and the Kohen will offer it before Hashem and atone for her, and she will become pure from the source of her blood. This is the law of or the procedure of a woman who gives birth to a boy or to a girl. Okay, and if she can't afford a sheep, then she can give birds, which are less expensive, as the elevation offering. Okay, so the big question that we're going to focus on, and many of the commentators focus on this question as well, is we can understand perhaps the need to mark the birth of a child with a sacrifice, but the choice of sacrifices seems a little bit odd. Why is she off? So why do we have 2 sacrifices? And both the olah and the chatat are generally associated with some sort of wrongdoing, of a misaction, of having acted inappropriately. So what did she do inappropriate to warrant bringing these specific sins? Right? We would have expected perhaps that the Torah says when she gives birth to a child, she should give a korban toda, a korban of thanksgiving.
Right.
That's what we would have expected. And in fact, the halacha is that a woman who goes through childbirth should recite Birkat HaGomel, which, as we've discussed in different settings in different years, is the stand-in for the Korban Toda, for the Thanksgiving offering, and that makes good sense. But why an Olah, why a Chatat? And we're gonna focus more on the Chatat tonight than the Olah, but both sacrifices are a little bit curious.
Does it have anything to do with Chava and the snake and
It might.
the curse of
Yes,
giving birth with pain?
We're gonna get there. So you were Mikhavenet, you anticipated what the Kli Yakar is going to tell us. So
Okay.
that's excellent. We'll get there in a moment.
Right.
Before the Kli Yakar, perhaps the most well-known explanation is the Gemara in Nida, which says as follows: Sha'alu Talmidav Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Mipnei ma amar Torah Yoledet mevi'ah korban. So the students of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai asked him, why does the Torah require a woman who gives birth to bring a sacrifice? And right, the assumption is that they're talking specifically about the sin offering, about the chatat. Amar lahen, b'sha'a shekora'at leiled, kofetzet v'nishba'at shelo tizkek leba'ala. So he says the reason is when this woman is crouched in labor, about to give birth, in the throes of labor, she might have, or the assumption is she did, make an oath that she's never going to be intimate with her husband again, because this is a horrible, painful situation that she now finds herself in. She wants to avoid it. So she curses her husband, curses whatever, and says, I'm never going to do this again. And
Oh,
so
she'll forget about the pain.
yeah. So maybe the court, right? So maybe she will forget about the pain. That's generally what happens. But anyway, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai assumes that the woman made such an oath, or maybe thought such a thing. Lefichach amra Torah tavi korban, and that's why the Torah requires her to bring a korban. So okay, the Ibn Ezra elaborates a bit further, and he says we actually, remember, we have two separate korbanot, we have two separate sacrifices. So he says that the ola, the elevation offering, is in case she had these thoughts about not wanting to have another child, but never articulated them. That's what an ola would atone for, is just the improper thoughts. And the chatat is if she actually articulates it. So again, we could say, well, then these korbanot should be dependent on if in fact she said this, or if in fact she thought it. The fact that every woman brings it, it doesn't sound like a great explanation.
No.
Let's just skip down a second to Rabbeinu Bachya, because he points out some other problems with this approach. V'chiper aleha, I don't, oh, we do have the English. V'chiper aleha, ein lashon kapara nofel ki im al hachet. So whenever the Torah uses kapara, or atonement, it means that there must have been a sin. Lefichach korban zeh shel yoledet mechudash kekorban hanazir. He says, therefore, this korban, the sacrifice of a yoledet, a woman who gives birth, is a mechuda. It's a chiddush. It's something we never would have come to on our own. Just like the nazir, just like with the nazir has to bring a sin offering at the completion of the nazirut. And I believe last year, maybe, you definitely in 1 year spoke about the nazir's sin offering and various explanations for that. So what the Rabbeinu Bachya seems to be implying is that there's a very strong one explanation for his sin offering. One explanation is that since the nazir denies himself certain physical pleasures during the period of being a Nazirite, specifically the pleasure of drinking wine, of intoxication, so he has to bring a sin offering because he was denying himself certain pleasures that are available to us if we do them in moderation and responsibly. The other explanation is that the sin offering of the Nazir is because here he was living in this elevated state of religious observance and spirituality, and he's about to come down from that. So really, once someone commits to living at the level of a Nazir, they have no right to stop living that way. And since he's about to return to, quote, normal life, he has to offer a sin offering. So the chiddush that Rabbeinu Bachya is referring to is just as the Nazir offers a sin offering before having sinned, right? At this point, when he brings the sin offering, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's still a Nazir. He's still living at this elevated status, but he's about to come down from it. So too with the Yoledet, with the woman, right? She may, whatever she's done, she hasn't done anything wrong at this point. If she in fact did make an oath of some sort, or does want to refrain from being with her husband, so that hasn't happened yet, right? You need to get medical clearance before you can resume intimacy after birth. So it's a bit more about something future looking. If she really does intend, I don't want to have another child because of this painful experience. So that's the chiddush that he refers to. Right? At the time that she gives birth, she hasn't done anything wrong. There's been no sin. So maybe some women might utter some inappropriate language during labor, but there's no real sin that's been committed at this point. If there is a sin, it would come later as it's been framed so far. And if you want to say that this sacrifice is because she was in a dangerous situation and was saved, so then we're giving the wrong korban. Then it would have to be a korban toda, not a korban chatat. It would have to be a Thanksgiving offering. So that's not a good explanation either. And so that's that's another hole in that explanation from the Gemara. Before we get to the Kli Yakar that Cheryl already intuited, let's just look at Baruch Levine, the JPS commentary. So this is more of an academic angle. And he says that maybe there's an issue with the way that we translate chatat. And we touched on this last week also. The translation sin offering for the Hebrew chatat is acceptable if understood properly, as it is in our verse. Ancient man seldom distinguished between sin and impurity. In man's relation to God, all sinfulness produced impurity. All impurity, however contracted, could lead to sinfulness if not attended to, and failure to deal properly with impurity aroused God's anger. The point is that the requirement to present a sin offering does not necessarily presume any offense on the part of the person so obligated. This offering was often needed solely to remove impurity. Childbirth, for example, was not sinful. It involved no violation of law, yet a sin offering was required. So his point is that we translate chatat as a sin offering, but it's not a really great translation, because really it should be translated as a purification offering. And why it's called a korban chatat and not a korban tahara, I don't have a good answer for that. But he says that don't think just because it's called a chatat and we translate that as sin offering, that it indicates any sin. Chatat may also imply simply the presence of tumah, the presence of impurity, which has to be rectified. Any questions so far?
The Rebbe, I think, has a helpful category on this one.
Okay.
There's a difference between ritual impurity and
Yeah.
spiritual impurity, something like that. But I really love what you have here for Rav Hirsch. I can hardly wait to get there because I have
Alrighty.
another whole idea that
Everyone's jumping
I
ahead of the
barely wait
game.
to share.
Okay, we'll get there. I promise. I promise we'll get there.
Okay.
First, we have to do where Cheryl wanted to jump to, which is the Kli Yakar, source number 5. So the Kli Yakar says as follows: Kipera v'chipera leha kohen v'tahera. The Kohen will atone for her, and she'll become pure. Kaparazu hi al avon hakadum shel chava. This atonement is for the, I don't want to say original sin because that puts us in a different religious context, but on the ancient sin of Chava, shegaram latzar haleda, umitoch tzara ulai heiticha dvarim kalpei mala lemor imkein lama ze anochi hara amal v'yisurin. Okay, so he says that this atonement is for the earlier sin of Chava, which led to pain during childbirth. Because of this pain, maybe the woman who's bringing the sacrifice might have said something inappropriate, right? He says, right, he's not so much concerned about her making a shua about being with her husband, but maybe she even cursed God in her pain, right? That she said something accusatory or inappropriate, kal peimala, towards heaven. Lemor imkein lama zanochi, questioning why she allowed herself to get into such a state. V'raya mimashe katuv v'tahera mimakor dameha. Right, the proof is when the Torah says v'tahera v'tahara mimakor dameha, that she will be purified from the source of her blood. We understand that to mean from the uterus, from the lifeblood, or from the blood that results in tuma and impurity associated with nida. But no, he says it's mikor dameha. Makor means source, but it also means origin. Min oto makor niftach lechatat lenida Ki hu garam la kol zeh, v'hainu avon chava kamor. So the makor refers to the original sin, again, not in a Christian understanding, just in a time, right, the first sin from Chava. And that's basically what he says, is that that somehow this chatat is to bring atonement for the sin of Chava. So it's a really interesting idea. Before I ask my questions, does anyone else have any questions or critique of this thought, or some difficulty that arises?
I'm not sure why the woman has to bring a sin offering, carbon ola, and the man has no role in this. He
Yeah.
put her life in danger. I mean, I guess the reason why uh, it's delayed, the carbonate are delayed for a certain amount of time because women very often didn't survive 3 days after giving birth.
Right, and that's actually one
So,
explanation for the difference between a boy and a girl, is that that again, this doesn't necessarily translate well to a 21st century
yeah,
sensibility, but that, the assumption is we want her to be in a state of tahara, of purity, or that there's more joy, or joy comes sooner with the bris. So that's why, perhaps that's one explanation for why the period of impurity is shorter for the birth of a boy versus the birth of a girl. But right, why is the husband blameless? So and interestingly, just on what you said, Rena, right? That is, and we've said this many times in many different contexts, why halachically it's quite mysterious, quite strange, but the fact that only a man is obligated in the mitzvah of pru urvu, in the mitzvah of
right.
procreation,
So,
is because a woman, right? There can't be a mitzvah that puts someone in danger. It doesn't quite work out because you can't
it doesn't
have,
work out.
right, you can't, but that also leads to leniencies in questions of abortion from a halachic perspective.
Yeah.
That's because the woman has no mitzvah in pru. But right, so if there's a sin, maybe it should be the husband's sin for endangering his life, for putting her in this situation that would cause danger. Yeah, so that's one good question. Anyone else? So the question I have is, okay, it's very interesting, but does this mean that this sin is never going to be atoned for? That there's never going to be a kapara? Because every woman who gives birth has to bring this korban and has to bring atonement. So there's, right, where's the atonement? Where's the kapara? If we're supposed to be atoning for Chava's sin, so where is it? It seems to just be perpetuating. That's one question. But the question I want to focus on is brought by Rabbi Shmuel Golden, and we'll get to what he says in a second, but we have to preface it with a pasuk from Devarim. The pasuk in Devarim tells us, Lo yumtu avot al banim, uvanim lo yumtu al avot, ish becheto yumatu. Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. They shall each be put to death only for their own crime. Okay, so we have the idea that before a child is bar bat mitzvah, so then whatever culpability they have for their sins they commit are the parents, and that's why we have the bracha of Baruch Sheptarani at the bar bat mitzvah. But the Torah is pretty clear that we don't punish later generations for the sins of the earlier generation. So how could it be that the Kli Yakar says that the sin offering of every woman who gives birth is due to the improper actions of Chava? How could future generations of women be held accountable for Chava's shortfall? Everyone got the question? Okay, so Rabbi Golden says something very powerful. He says the key to understanding this approach may well lie in the distinction that we have noted elsewhere. While Judaism absolutely rejects the Christian concept of original sin, we cannot deny the reality of intergenerational reverberation. That's a term he made up. Intergenerational reverberation. We are not responsible for the transgression committed by Adam and Chava at the beginning of time. We are, however, affected by that sin's ramifications. This is not a punishment, but a reality of life. Had Adam and Chava not sinned, we would now be living a very different existence in the Garden of Eden. Similarly, we are all concretely connected to each other across the generations. Such overarching life issues as where we are born, to whom, into what environment, and in fact, whether or not we are born at all, are determined not only by God, but also by our parents and by those who came before them as well. Even more importantly, our decisions and actions today will critically affect the lives of our children and their progeny tomorrow. Right? So that also, right, nature versus question of nature and nurture, question of epigenetics. But we understand that even if I'm not held accountable for, you know, parents having a high cholesterol, it still means I've got to be extra careful about my cholesterol and how much fat and how much unhealthy food I eat, no matter how delicious it is, right? That we all understand that there are consequences that impact future generations, even if future generations aren't responsible or accountable for that. And now he takes it home. At the decisive moment of childbirth, therefore, the Torah graphically reminds the new parents through a series of rituals of the phenomenon of intergenerational reverberation. The mother's state of tuma, the consequent period of physical separation from her husband, the offerings she brings in the aftermath of these events, all result from actions committed by her primal ancestor millennia earlier. The Torah's message cannot be clearer. We are each partially a product of what came before. How careful then must new parents be with their own continuing decisions and actions, for those very decisions and actions will help shape the lives of generations to come. So she brings the chatat to, right, according to this approach, because she needs that reminder that just as you went through this experience of the pain of childbirth, which wasn't an enjoyable experience, which wasn't something that was pleasant, and we know the reason that you went through it is because of what Chava did. So it's almost like the Rabbeinu Bachya said before, it's almost looking forward. So just as you continue to experience the consequences of Chava's inappropriate action, be aware that this new baby, this child, is going to experience and is going to feel the impact of your actions and whatever you do in raising them, right? Could be for the good, could be for the bad. But according to this, it's really more of an educational lesson and a message that as the woman has just gone through this very powerful experience, that she has she should be aware of all this. And you know, I think most new parents are aware of the awesome, impossible task that lays before them. But I think it's a strong message as to what the meaning of this sacrifice might be. I'll stop again if there's any questions or comments.
Does this apply to the sin of the red heifer also? I mean excuse me, the Egel Hazahav, pardon me, the Egel Hazahav.
I mean, so I think he would say yes, meaning like our relationship to Hashem, our connection to Torah is fundamentally changed as a result. We might not feel it in the same physical way, but you know, again, whether the Mishkan and perhaps as a continuation of the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash is seen as only a response to the sin of the golden calf. So the very way in which we relate and worship Hashem is strongly impacted by it. Um, so yeah, I think he would say yes. I think he would say that that any point in in history continues to have reverberations to us in our day. Some are felt more powerfully, some less powerfully, but I think the Cheda Egel is one that echoes is still there. Okay, so let's move on to Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch starts by noting that the parsha began Isha ki Tazria, which literally means when a woman Tazria is to give forth seed. So there's actually a lot of one school of commentaries we're not going to focus on now, but one and Rashi brings this, says that Isha ki Tazria really is the opening of a discussion of sexuality and of female sexuality, and that right, all sorts of interesting discussions about again, whether it's about in general or specific to the give birth of a boy. So the Gemara says that if you want to, one way to have a child, a boy, or ensure you're going to have a boy, is that the wife should climax first. That's what might be implied by Tazria. Um, Again, that not scientifically verifiable at all, but that is what the Gemara says. But that one way that this verb Tazria is taken is to indicate the physical pleasure. But the Rav Hirsch takes it differently. And he says that there's only one other place in Chumash where we have this shorish, this root, zera, turned into a verb like this, lihazria. That's all the way back in Gan Eden. So not with even before the action of Chava. Vayomer Elokim, God says, we're in chapter 1, during creation. Tache ha'eretz deshe esev mazria zera. Eitz pri oser pri lamino asher zar obo ala aretz vayichen. God said, let the earth sprout forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it. And it was so. Batos ha'eretz desha esev mazria zera laminehu. And so the earth brought forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants of every kind. Ve'etz oseh pri asher zar obo laminehu, vayar Elokim ki tov, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it, and God saw that it was good. Rav Hirsch says as follows. When a woman conceives and gives birth, basically the seed of plants and herb-yielding seed, the seed-forming activity of plants for the continuation of their species, when applied to human beings, is the usual term for the offspring by which man continues his generation. By the use of the expression Tazria here, which only occurs elsewhere in Genesis 1:11 and 12, which we just read, referring to the activity of plants for the continuation of the species, the mother's role in producing progeny is looked at in purely material physical character of its physiological process. And with that one word, the whole of Tuma spoken of here is shown. The highest and noblest occupation, which is the whole future of the human race, is built, in which the whole construction of womanhood finds its purpose and goal, the whole process in the body of a mother for the production of a new human being, is of purely physical nature. Man originates, grows, and exists like a plant, and the noblest and most glorious name that the human tongue can utter, the name mother, reminds one at the same time of the purely physical, unfree process of human origin. If anywhere, it is surely here that the fact must be established, that in spite of this, once he is born, man is a morally free agent. Above all, the mother herself, under the fresh impression of her physical passive and painful submission to the forces of nature at the most sublime moment of her earthly calling, has to reestablish the principle of her own spiritual station. And only after this impression of lack of freedom of will has completely passed away, has she, by an offering, to undertake to allow herself of her own free will to give herself up to the whole spiritual height of her calling of woman and mother, which is now restarting with all its momentous and often painful moments. Anne, what do you like so much about this?
I went to check in his vocabulary and his lexicon exactly where he was getting these ideas from.
Mm-hmm.
And I found two very interesting things. One is that he translates the word tame as also not only, number one, losing purity or defiling, but being bound, losing freedom.
Interesting.
And he bases it on Leviticus 19:31. So that that I felt was a very helpful concept,
Mm-hmm.
being bound. That's what he's saying is going on here. And in a way, she's not free to move around much either for a period of time. But of course, any woman who is bleeding and would like the bleeding to stop naturally of itself and not reoccur again is grateful to have an excuse not to have to go running around. Okay. I mean, it's a way of our halachas on this are really so beautiful. They protect the womb of a woman in a
Yeah.
way that no other system does. I'm sorry to get so emotional about it, but when I think of what some people have to go through simply because they don't have an opportunity to stay bound a little while longer, to be certain that the major bleeding is stopped and so on. And the ironies of blood that does not defile is the way the Rebbe goes with it, but I don't want to go there right now. But this is, I think, is beautiful. However, the other parallel that I found, I thought was really interesting. He takes the expression for the offering itself and says the chata in the case of, and we just went through all of these pasukim. This is just really great. It is in the installation offering of Aharon and his sons. What do they offer? They offer a sin offering and they offer a ola offering. And he calls that sin offering of inauguration a free from sin offering.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
So I think that is part of his point, and he's somebody who loves the concept of dedication. And I would just want to offer an experience. In other words, she's dedicating herself to take on the role of being a mother.
Right. Right.
And why is that so important? I learned this last time when we were in the hospital with Joshua, thank God, at Mercy, that the nurses there, well, they're just incredible, they really are. And they are spending all of their time. It's to them. I talked with some of them after a while because we were fortunate enough to keep Joshua pretty much just in the room with us for all the time because I was nursing him. So, but their own sorrow comes from not being able to get the mothers to connect with their babies. Mm. They spend most of their time when they are talking with them to try to convince them to really dedicate themselves to be mothers. And look at this beautiful opportunity we have, and yet we don't really quite frame it that way, but I wish we would do it more so, because it is a terrific commitment. And it is something that cannot be taken for granted. And it is this gives one the opportunity. So if we could think of it as a parallel to an installation ceremony, then I think it makes sense that it's a sin offering. Why? Well, what do we do when we get married? Before we get married, we go ahead and recite all of the sins that we could possibly have done,
Right.
along with the rest of Israel, and then we get married. In other words, this is a new beginning. I want to put whatever was behind me behind, and now I want to go forward. What do you
Okay.
think of that?
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a beautiful framing of it.
Mhm.
All right, let's just and any other reactions to this? So we actually we are Israel's part of a fellowship, and there's through the JCC, the Diller Fellowship, and we're actually hosting an Israeli student for the next week and a half or so. And
Oh,
he
wow,
he just
wonderful.
got here, so I'm a little bit anxious to sign off and go meet this kid. So I'm gonna stop here, but there's two more two more ideas that you're welcome to look at your own. The first 13 and 14 from the Chama Leibowitz and the Mishnah Pirkei Avot, and then Rabbi Weiss I don't think what he writes is pshat at all. I don't think it's the plain meaning of the text, but it is an interesting meditation and riff on this seemingly curious chatat sin offering. Judy, it was great to have you back with us, and we hope that you'll continue to join us moving forward, but not next week, because next week we're going to all be getting ready for Pesach, and we'll resume again after the holiday. But I wish everyone a wonderful week, and hopefully see you all soon. Violet
I'm
Tov.
Sameach to everybody.
Let's hope. Thank you.
Yeah,
Rabbi.
thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Great to see everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.